is Noah and I tell the truth. I've searched everywhere under roof. This has got to be a classic goof. The unicorns were here but they went poof. I climbed up and down the ladder, checked the decks but it don't matter. I can't find the unicorns. I'm sure I saw them come aboard. What am I gonna tell the Lord if I have lost the unicorns? It's no time for hide-go-seek. If they are playing tricks on me, they're gonna wish that they were never born. Grounded in the stalls they'll be. Lord, have mercy on me if I can't find the unicorns. My name is Noah and I tell the truth. I've searched everywhere under roof. This has got to be a classic goof. The unicorns were here but they went poof. Shan brushed them yesterday, Ham fed them oats and hay. Japheth said that he shined their horn. Throughout the ark we have looked, this is one for the books. Where in the world's the unicorns? I need to nip this in the bud, or surely my name is mud if I can't locate the unicorns. Somewhere here they are near, they couldn't just disappear, but I fear lost unicorns. My name is Noah and I tell the truth. I've searched everywhere under roof. This has got to be a classic goof. The unicorns were here but they went poof. Dear Lord, this is Noah. You know I'm not one to complain. I love your creation, but there's one that drives me insane. I can tolerate spiders, put up with the snakes and the bats. But Lord, please have mercy, you know I'm allergic to cats. I'll gladly clean stalls, but there's one that knocks off my socks. 'Cause you haven't smelled nothing till you whiff that cat's litter box. They purr and they mew, they tease the birds too, and they scratch. I'm feeling itchy, and Lord, I'm allergic to cats. When you bring the animals in the ark 2 by 2, the cattle, the lizards, and the kangaroos, when the felines come on board, Lord, may I go scat, because I'm allergic to cats. Yeah, I am. I love fuzzy bears, horses, and cute puppy dogs. But there's something gross when you step on a coughed up fur ball. Cats spend their day sleeping, they shed their hair on my lap. My eyes look puffy, it's because I'm allergic to cats. Here they come now, up the ramp and to the ark. Well, I guess they are kind of cute, Lord. Oh well, here, kitty, 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 might as well come aboard. It's gonna be a long voyage, I'm sure of that. The mice are stressed, and Lord, I'm allergic to cats. When you bring the animals in the ark 2 by to the cattle, the lizards, and the kangaroos. When the felines come on board, Lord, may I go scat, because I'm allergic to cats. It's rumored they have 9 lives, and Lord, I'm allergic to cats. Oh, don't you love them?
Here for the next 17 weeks or so, depending on what's going on and how long it takes for her to go through the chemo stuff. She's had it pretty rough already. This whole break, it turned out being helpful in the fact that she had this stuff happen over the break time rather than it being in the middle of things going well in her life with everything going on around. But she's had emergency surgery where she had to have 2 big masses taken off her ovaries. She had just a whole hysterectomy is what happened in that. And then she's also dealt with having to go through chemo. She's already gone through the first round of it and had a whole day where a whole 3 days actually, where she just couldn't stop throwing up and had to go back to the hospital to get on an IV to keep herself all hydrated. And so she's going through it rough, and she's not even gone through the hard part yet. What they said that she's going to go through even more than this. So I'll be praying for her, and this has put Shy in a forced to grow up stage very quickly and be the helper and the leader at the home in a lot of ways, and driving around sort of. With Mom riding beside her when she's trying to get her license to be finally be able to drive for free without someone telling her what to do. But so she's in the midst of that, and so be praying for her. So what we've got worked out is that Shy is going to do the youth for right now and be doing that here. We're going to work out the details of that for her for Sunday school. Regarding other things, we're considering actually with Vacation Bible School this year just putting it to a halt because of the fact of we're still in this thing and it isn't over with, and it's probably not going to be over with by the time we even reach July. And just the whole fact that we've been gone for almost 2 months, haven't been able to have any meetings together. Stores aren't even open in a lot of ways and a lot of stuff to be able to go and get that. And getting people to come and put things together at the last minute. Anybody who's done VBS knows you can't do it at the last minute. And then collecting a bunch of kids together for a week, it's just probably best that we're going to just have to do a halt this year on it and look to do it again next year. I think everything's kind of been put to that way, and it's frustrating. Everything's gone that way, but that's just the way we are right now and situation we have to make. So, hope you like our little booth. We built that for doing this, and I think we finally, hopefully, got all the bugs worked out. We're still a lot of little details had to figure out. Spend a lot of time on the phone with people, do a lot of internet research, figuring out how to get camera settings right, how to get computer settings right, how to figure out the program that you have to run through. So it's been a lot of ups and downs. So when it's been me doing this and you can't hear me, it's because we got an issue that we didn't know what we had to deal with. And there's a lot of little ins and outs to make sure are working right. And as I said to some people who've already talked to me about it, I've probably been over on the computer for over 100 hours in this break time trying to figure out how to do this. And it's been a lot of work figuring it out, but I think we finally got it, hopefully. But we want to continue live streaming and doing this on a regular basis, as we are presently live streaming right now our service. We want to make it an outreach to our community. We've had people from from obviously out of state that have been involved. We had people all the way from Illinois that tuned in. I don't know how they got us, how they connected to us, but we've had that. We've had people from Kentucky, Brother Decker, who's tuned in a few times and been in part of our live stream service. So that's been a blessing to have that. But we want to be able to reach other people, and this might be one of the means by which we can. So we're going to really work toward doing that and continuing to advance that and be used of the Lord that way since we have it now. So that's one of the benefits we've gotten out of this whole coronavirus stuff. So I'm glad to see everybody's here. I'm glad to see you're sitting apart. I will tell you this, and I'm not of the same opinion that maybe everybody else might be. I think it's kind of blown out of proportion, but I'm going to leave it to everybody's precaution. You do, like what the governor of Iowa has said, I'm not going to close down tell people to have to stay in their homes because people are adults and people should be able to be responsible for themselves. And that's the way we want to treat it here at the church. We did put out the hand sanitizer for anybody who wants to lather up, whatever. Get yourself all ready for that. But we just, God doesn't want us to live in fear, live in anxiety. And if you do a little bit of just multiplying the numbers and looking at the way things are, it's not near as bad as it seems the media makes it out to be. So doesn't mean that there's not a threat, but even to this day, the flu has killed more people this season than this virus has. So, and we don't close down the world every year for the flu. So those are things that I just think we need to use some common sense to think through some of this stuff. Does it mean that we should go hug and sing Kumbaya together, holding hands? Probably not. If you want to be safe, don't do it. So, but I will tell you some thoughts that I've thought through this whole virus is that I think this opportunity we've watched has been not only a help from the Lord to be able to reach in ways that we couldn't before or didn't before. For churches, I would say I've watched a lot of things of how churches are doing stuff and seen people being reached. It's opened up hearts of people that weren't formerly opened to hear the things of God and to have a heart ready to hear what the Lord would have them to do. So that's been an amazing thing to see that. God uses those kinds of things to open up hearts. I think also it's revealed the hearts of men in a lot of ways. That I think it's revealed people who are not necessarily have good motives, and it's just kind of shown it by the way they responded to it. It's shown what kind of people can be during these times. Specifically thinking about some of the way in which you've watched some of these governors and how they've abused. Honestly, I believe they've abused their power and the way they've treated their own people and. So that's frustrating, watching that. But it's been an opportunity to grow, walk with the Lord, know the Lord, be challenged, be stretched. It's been an opportunity to be tempted. How many people felt temptation being stuck at home doing nothing? I'll raise my hand, okay? There have been those, that if you've heard that phrase, an idle mind is the devil's playground. Amen. And you get put in a place where you're in an idle spot. It's opportunity to do a lot of things you shouldn't do. So, those are things that maybe the Lord might have dealt with your heart through that. And so, let Him have His way. All right, well, let's get into our lesson this morning. This is the theme right now. We've been in the third C of the 7 C's of history. We're dealing with Noah's Ark. Last week, I had my phone up here, so I was watching the live chat. I don't have it today. Because I'm assuming most of you are here that were live chatting me last week, so I didn't plan for the phone. But I will say this, if you speak and you want to be heard by the mic, this is the only one. So you have to talk loud or they're just going to not know what you said if you give an answer. So we go through that. We have mics that should be here by Tuesday that are going to be used for specials and stuff. We've got 4 of them on order. It's been 3 weeks since I ordered the mics. Everything runs so slow right now in the mail, and we finally have gotten them in the shipping process. So, but those are going to be used for maybe even for like if we wanted to do where people could read Scripture out loud and put it on live stream, we could do that as well if you feel bold enough to read in a mic for that reason. Okay? All right. Well, let's go ahead. Talking about the flood. We've been in Genesis 6 through 9. And last week we talked about the nature of the fact that the flood was a global flood. And we mentioned that there are a few things that speak to the fact that there's a global flood. Anybody want to remember that was paying attention last week or is familiar with the topic? Give me some ideas of what you think defines this as a global flood and not a local flood. Wayne?
Fossils all over the world.
Fossils all over the world? Okay. Billions of dead things?
Water always runs everywhere.
Water doesn't just stay in one spot, does it? It runs all over, okay?
Covered the highest mountains.
Covered the highest mountains, how high?
30 feet.
About 20 feet, which is about 15 cubits. Okay? Okay, we didn't talk about that, but you know that topic well, okay? Okay, we didn't talk about rock layers or really fossils too much, but obviously those are there. Okay, anything else? In the scripture itself, was there anything that seemed to be indicative that this was a global flood?
Is it anything like some of the landscape, the way some of the land is formed in certain areas?
Yeah, if you, I mean, we didn't talk about that either, but if you were to take an aerial map and look, you can see water runoff indications all over the planet. It obviously had water at one point. But give me something out of the scripture itself.
Oh, I was going to say other cultures have stories.
We did talk about that. That was one. Global, worldwide stories of a flood legends that they call it. And how many were there? Anybody remember? I gave a number that the ancient cultures have.
5 or 6.
A little more than 5 or 6. It's about 300. About 300 stories from different cultures all over the world. Yes?
God said that all living things would die.
All living things would die. There's a good indicator, right? All living things that have breath will die. So that's a pretty good indicator.
Waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days.
Waters prevail. There's a good one. Timing indicator that tells us this was global as well. Okay? If you climb the highest mountain, you'd still die because it covered the highest mountains. Okay, good. All right. Question we want to start off with this morning is when you look at an ark, the picture of Noah's Ark, if you were to look online or you look in a book somewhere, typically when you see pictures of Noah's Ark, how does it look like? How does it look like?
Tiny little boat with a giraffe and an elephant sticking out of the top.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else got an idea? Yeah, the bathtub boat on water. It's, yes?
A barn floating.
A barn floating. Yeah, it doesn't look like what, yes, go ahead. Way too many windows, okay.
Like a barge.
Yeah, it does. It should look more like a barge than a little tiny pleasure boat with animals all packed on it, right? Because when you see the descriptions that the Bible's going to give here that we'll see here this morning, it's no little tiny thing. This thing was gigantic in size. All right, so let's get in our text. Go to Genesis chapter 6, verse 13 through 16. If I can get a reader for us, verses 13 through 16. Let's have an adult do it first here. 13, 14, 15, 16. Go ahead, Bill.
And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence in them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood, roof shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above, and the door of the ark shall then set in the side thereof, with lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it.
Okay, so let's get some ideas here for the ark. Who provided the construction plans for the ark?
God
God provided the construction plans. Who then made the ark? Noah is the one that's attributed being the one who built the ark. What was the ark to be made of? What kind of material? Gopher wood. Anybody know what gopher wood is? Acacia. Has anybody else got any other ideas?
I assume it was wood made out of gophers.
Actually, nobody knows for sure what that wood is, because this is really the only time you see this wood mentioned in the scripture. And people have guessed that it could be a type of wood. It could be a way wood is put together. Like we would think like plywood we understand plywood is made of most often pine. It could be a description of how the wood is put together. We don't know. We're just kind of left with the guess of that it's probably some kind of wood that has changed its name, or it's no longer in existence over time now. And some people have said they believe it was actually cypress wood. But again, the fact that the Bible uses cypress as a wood in other places, I mean, not too far away from Genesis, uses it. When we get into the book of Exodus, cypress is used quite a bit. You don't hear it referring to it as gopher wood. So that's it's still left a little bit of question to whether that's actually the reason. But the reason why they would say that is because they believe, well, what kind of wood would you want if you're going to build a boat that's going to sit on the water for over a year? You want something that can handle the water and be waterproof, and cypress, of course, is supposed to be that. What are the dimensions of the ark? Give me your measurements. 300 cubits by 50 cubits by 30 cubits, okay? 300 by 50 by 30. If we were to kind of measure some of those things out. By the way, what is a cubit? Let's just talk about that for a moment. What's a cubit? Fingertip to the elbow. And the cubits have varied over cultures and varied over time. They've had different kinds of standards of cubits. They actually have one that they call the royal cubit, which is elbow to the top, then a handbreadth on the top of that would be considered a cubit. But it could range anywhere from 18 to 21 inches. And so if you were to measure that out, if you were to go to 300 cubits, that comes out to about 510 feet long. If you're just going to give a cubit, let's say a cubit of 20.4. We'll pick that in there. It's about 510 feet long. If you were to do the height of it, it's about 51 feet high running on that. If you were to do the width of it, it's about 85 feet wide. To give you a little bit of a picture of that, for you to understand how big that would be, if you start right at the intersection of 10th Street and Diamond, and you worked your way down, kept walking down until you got to 8th Street, that's the distance, that's the length of the ark. That looks a little bigger than a bathtub boat, right? If you want to get the width of it, you start with the corner of our building and you go all the way across the street and then go 15 feet in further. That's 85 feet. That's the width of it. If you want to get the height of it, take the building at its highest point and double it. That's the height of it. So that's what we're talking about, the size of this ark. We're not talking about something that's a tiny little boat. We're talking about something that's a pretty big boat, right? You think you could build that overnight? It's going to take a while to build something like that, right? What else is he supposed to have on the ark, on the inside and outside? Pitch. He's to have pitch on the inside and on the outside of the ark. What's pitch? And challenge some thoughts for a moment. Okay, where does tar come from? Where does that come from? Where does that come from? Fossils. Where did fossils come from? Noah's flood. So maybe pitch didn't come from tar. So where else? You know what they used to? Yeah, you know what they used to do before they even started using tar oil? They used to use tree sap. I mean, they used that back in the 1800s, 1700s when they were building ships. And they'd pitch a ship, they would coat it with some kind of a tree resin that they were able to squeeze out of the trees, whatever kind of tree they used. And that was their form of waterproofing a boat. So most likely it's not the traditional petroleum base that we think from our culture and our time, okay? It's probably would have been something like that, okay? Then he talks about a door and window. Tell me about those. Where's the door at? Or how many doors do we got first? One, obviously. Okay, where are they at? Where's this door at? In the side. There's a little bit of an indicator that where this might be. Did anybody notice in the passage it tells you about the door? He says lower, second, and third stories connected to it. I don't know if he's meaning that it's at the high. It's on the top floor, and then you got the lower floors behind under it, where this door is at. So I would think if you want to build a door, you don't want to build it in the first floor. Anybody know why? It'd be underwater. So most likely it was probably at the top at least. Thinking about that. Window. He says there's a window. It's a cubit above. What's a cubit above?
18 inches.
Okay, it's 18 to 21 inches. But what does he mean by a window that's a cubit above? What's he mean by that? It's on the top of the boat. And how long do you think this window is? We only know how high it is. How long do you think it is? Why would you need a window on that boat?
Fresh air.
You need air. Why would you need air? If you got a floating zoo, you go to a zoo that's got all open ventilation and you know how nasty it smells. Imagine being in a boat that's closed like that for a year. You surely want some kind of a ventilation system going on. And so it's probably something that went the whole length of the top of the boat. A window. If we're talking about a window, it's just some kind of a roof that sat on the top that opened up about a foot, 18 inches up, 21 inches up to the height. It's possible that they had windows that they could close or doors on those windows that they could close. Why would that be important? Storm? Yeah, are they going to be in any storm? They're going to be in a storm that goes on for at least 40 days and 40 nights. And then they're going to deal with big waves because it talks about at one point that there's going to be a huge wind that's going to blow the water off the earth. What does wind do to water? Makes big waves. And you might have big waves coming and crashing in the side of the boat. You might want to close your window. Right? Yep.
I don't think they would close the windows because, like you said, there's a lot of animals in there.
Well, not close it permanently, but close it for the sake of getting water, to keep water from coming in.
You ever see those pipes that come up out of the ground for methane that are constantly burning? You close the window and light a match, there won't be no boat.
Yeah, but that's after a long time of that going on. Long time. We're talking about in a storm or in the time when you needed to close things down. Or you have at least a good cover to where it doesn't work its way in, so while you got it open. Okay, so this doesn't sound like a little small thing at all, does it? Doesn't sound like a little small thing. Let me show you something else I've got. I've got somebody want to hand these out real quick? I've got about 20 of them, 25 of them. Just hand them out to adults if you want to take one. Show you a picture of this. Now this is obviously for those who've been to the Creation Museum. You've seen the pictures of this ark and you've seen the building they've made out of this thing. It's not the same look that you would normally think of the traditional ark when you see it. And I'll explain a little bit what they did there and explain some thoughts that we can go through that. Okay. I got some kid ones for young people. Shia, you want to hand those out? These are things that you can work through if you want on your own. Okay. Thanks. All right, so here's some thoughts. Notice that the ark doesn't look like the traditional, what you would think looks like a big old kind of a rounded type big barge boat. Pretty long. They put the distance in there next to a railroad cars. How many railroad cars, or how many, I guess it's not railroad cars, we're looking at tractor cars. How many think that would be, the distance? They got one there next to it. What's the average distance, Fred, of one of yours?
Oh, the truck on it, 53 feet.
What without the truck?
40,
So 510 divided by 46 feet. Anybody got that number? You get the distance of this thing. We're looking at, it'd take about 2 to make 100. So about 20, well, 2 to make 100, and then you got to do it by 5. 5, about 10, 15 of those in length. Something like that. Does that sound close? 15, okay. All right. Let's talk about the people have talked about how could you build a boat completely made of wood and it would be able to handle being on the water for a year time and dealing with probably gigantic waves. Because you remember we've talked about what actually initiated the flood last week. Fountains of the deep shooting up, water shooting up into the sky, forming rain clouds that came back down. You're talking about tsunami-type water happening, where water's moving quick. It's not going slow. It's picking up anything anything big it can and taking it wherever it wants to take it. How can a wooden boat handle that?
Only God can build a boat to stay like that, because even a Titanic was down.
But there were no icebergs, I'm sure, that he had to deal with yet. So how would you be able to do this with a wooden boat? Well, now we say this is Noah built this. Now we can say, well, Noah built it and God just kind of sustained it and protected it. Okay, I'll go along with that, but I'm going to just put into the practical here. God gave Noah the ability to do this, and maybe Noah built it to such a way that it could handle that. You know, instead of just saying Noah didn't know anything about building boats and he just put together a few bits of 2x4s and there it worked. I imagine he probably knew what he was doing. Or if he didn't know what he's doing, he hired somebody who knew what they were doing to build something like this. Yeah. Yeah, so how do you think you're going to get a boat to not start pulling apart and twisting and moving, especially if you've got big waves hitting it? I mean, they could flip the boat over if they're gigantic waves. How do you keep it from bending and moving or going over a wave and going like that through a wave? Yeah.
I think I read a study about the U.S. Navy did something to study on this. They found that it's large and flat on the bottom, it can handle a lot of rough waves. It's kind of pointed like that, so it could tip over.
It tips easier when it's more pointed on the keel. Yeah. Yeah, it's probably was something made to be more flat on the bottom at least. The wider it is, the more safer it's going to be. The 300 by 50 by 30 is actually considered a good range for boats, for buoyancy. Anybody who's ever built boats would know that this is actually within a very safe range. The boat can handle the most amount for that distance, the proportions being just in that way, the 350 by 30. See this, this is called a sail. They put up here on the top of it, or they have another name for it, I forget. And then you got a skeg here on the back of it. This is normally not part of the traditional look of Noah's Ark. Anybody got an idea why Answers in Genesis did that and decided to go with an ark that has this big wooden fin on the top and then a skeg, a big old kind of a rudder on the back? Anybody got an idea what their reasoning is for that? Turn the boat? What do you think the top part's doing, the fin, the wooden fin would be doing? It catches the wind. And when it catches the wind, what's it going to do with the boat? It's going to turn the boat into the wave rather than hitting a wave side on. What's more dangerous for a boat to be hit by a wave, where it hits it straight on or it hits it side on? It's more dangerous for it to hit it side on because it will actually turn the boat. It can actually turn the boat. Hits it straight on, it can go through the wave. Okay? What's this little rudder in the back, or the skeg in the back? What would that be doing? Steering? It catches in the water is what it's doing. So as the wind is pulling it, it's doing a counteraction in the back, so it's not going so far that it turns another way. It does a kind of a counteraction, and it works it to stay straight, like you were saying. It's holding it in its place. So that's the reason why. Now, here people say, well, the argument that comes up is, well, an ark is actually just a box. The word means box. How many times do you think the word ark is used in the Bible? Outside of in this account? Any other places in the Bible is it found in Genesis 6 through 9 account? Huh? No, that's a different word entirely. Yes, it is. It's not the Ark of the Covenant. There's only one other place it's used. It's used to describe Moses' little basket that he floated in among the reeds. It's the word Teba is the word. And you find that word used only in 2 places in the entire Bible. How do you find out the meaning of a word? Anybody know how you would find out the meaning of a word? Where are you going to get the meaning from?
Dictionary.
Okay, so let's say you don't have a dictionary and you want to find out the meaning of a word. How are you going to find the meaning of a word? Okay, cut out dictionary, cut out glossary, cut out concordance, cut out any of that kind of stuff. How are you going to find the meaning? How are you going to find it? By what you're looking at in the text. Tell me how you're going to find out what the meaning of that word is. By the way it's being used. It's called critical thinking, by the way it's being used. To say it is just to be a box would be, there's nowhere in there that tells us that it was a box shape, right? You don't see that it says it has corners and it's flat on one end and flat on the other and flat on the bottom. It just says 300 by 50 by 30. 300 by 50 by 30 can also incorporate round edges as well. Would that be okay? Do you think Noah's basket that he floated in was a box? Does it tell us it was a box? It doesn't. It was a basket made of reeds. And it says that she did the same thing that Noah did with it. She pitched it within and without with slime and pitch. She actually coated it to waterproof it. Some people have actually suggested that based on the way the word is used in both places, it's used to preserve life in both places. That they said the word could almost probably be understood as a lifeboat. A lifeboat, which doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a box. Okay? And then we're thinking about the very fact, the very nature of, again, I'm not saying this is biblical. This is just imagination. This is trying to use the best knowledge that people have to be able to come up with what would work. If you've got lots of wind, you got lots of waves, you want something that isn't going to be going like this in the water, right? Do you think that's going to be healthy for anybody in the boat? Or any animal in the boat? You're probably going to have the animals die of stress if they don't die of getting beaten together in the boat anytime that happens. You want the boat to be something that's safe. You want it to be something that's comfortable, to be able to survive. So you're not going to make something that's going to be more dangerous on the water. You're going to work at trying to find something possibly, if you're the one that's building it, something that will work to survive this kind of a cataclysm that's going to happen. Okay? Let's talk about the wood for a moment. And I'm going to get into one other topic that comes up that's on our worksheet there. Wood. We're talking about planking, the types of going along the side of the boat. How many layers of planking do you think Noah would have had to have used? 2 or 3? You don't think it's just one plank on top of another then? And that's just one wall? Anybody convinced that that's what that was built on? And how's he keeping it together without it breaking apart? I mean, the seams starting to come apart. How would he do that? Dowels. Yeah, they actually way back in the ancient Oriental times, they found boats that have been, lost at sea or lost in a bay, and they've unearthed them, and they found that it's not really that complicated. It just took a lot of work. what they did is they had mortise and tenons, and they had what they call tree nails or trunnels that they actually used to hold several layers together and lock them together. And what these tree nails were, they're basically wooden pegs. They said they'd drill a hole in the side, and they would hammer that tree nail in. And they said what it did is it locked it together, the layers together, and when it got wet, guess what it did? It swelled and held it together. So, and then you not only got that going on, you've got stuff happening where you've got these tenons, you've got the mortises, you've got the little dowel, or not the dowel, but the little, it'd be sort of like a biscuit, if you know what I'm talking about, if you've ever done woodwork that holds two pieces together that are interlocking on top, interlocking on the side, all of that happening and interlocking into multiple layers. It's not going to break apart. It's just going to take a lot of work to put it together. Some people have argued, they said, well, people back in the 1800s built wooden ships and they called it a tight ship. You know, because they had it all the seams together, everything all pulled together. But then they would talk about having to tighten a ship. Anybody ever heard of how they would do that? Tighten a ship? They talk about it in the book of Acts. Whenever Paul was on that ship that was about to be busted apart, what did they have to do? Anybody remember what they had to do with the ship? They had to get the tighteners. What they would do is they'd throw a chain or throw a rope out over the front of the hole, and then they would stretch it and hold it tight. And they'd pull it together and tighten the ship together, because what's happening with the ship in a big storm is it's starting to break loose. But if you got something that's built to the specs that would have taken a lot of work, a lot of time to do, it's less likely that it's going to do that. And you're not going for 14 or 15 years back and forth across the sea. How long has he got to be on the boat? A year's time. Okay, you know, people have all these kinds of reasons why this could happen, and they say those people that built those big wooden boats back in the 1800s, they fell apart, and they constantly had to pull them apart. One of them that was a 410-foot boat. I forget the name of the ship. 410-foot boat. They said it fell apart. It broke apart at sea. You know how many times it went across the Atlantic? It did it for 14 years. Went across the Atlantic, back and forth, 14 years before it finally broke apart. You're talking about one ship lasted for 14 years made of wood. We're talking about one ship doesn't even have to do anything but just sit in the water for 1 year. And even for not even a full year, it's at the 7th month it comes to a rest. It's no longer floating. So we're looking at something that's only got to be in the water floating for 7 months. And yeah, it's going to deal with big waves. It's going to deal with big currents that are going to push it and pull it and move it all around. And it's going to test it. And it's going to pull on it. And it's going to maybe try to rip parts apart. But if somebody was diligent about making sure this thing is going to be a lifeboat that survives a cataclysm the way in which God was describing, I'm sure he's going to make sure he goes and does all the extra precautions. By the way, how long does it take for Noah to build the boat? Anybody know? It says that God gave man 120 years, but does it say that it took Noah to build 120 years? It doesn't tell us how long he built it. He could have built it in a matter of a few years, could have built it over a 70-year period. We don't know. We're just kind of left. Now, I will say this. If things were the same conditions as they are today, I don't know that they are or not, so don't hold me to this. But if they're the same conditions, do you want to leave wood outside for 120 years? What happens to wood? If Gopher Wood can handle it, yeah. Yeah, we don't know the condition in which whether wood would start to rot, just being left out, or weather and start getting weaker and weaker and weaker. We don't know. You can't leave wood out very long unless it's a specific type of wood that can handle that. Well, we don't know that either. It doesn't say that. The only place it says in the Bible where it had not rained yet was in Genesis chapter 2, and it said that was before man was even there. So we don't really know for sure whether rain ever happened or not. We just know it hadn't rained like this yet.
It was already water sealed also.
It was water sealed, so that would survive, that would help it. Maybe he had to repitch it a few times. That's possible. Yeah. So we're kind of left in this condition. We don't know. There's a lot of answers we don't know, but I'm trying to go down paths that I think skeptics like to poke holes in And we want to be able to answer some of those questions that obviously this is possible, right? And all we got to do is look over the whole world, and we can tell the whole world at one point has been covered by water. Even people who are skeptics that don't believe in this account will tell you that it's obvious there's been water. They just want to classify it to localized floods that have happened all over the world at different times in history. I just say one big worldwide flood works and answers all the answers that people come up with, all the questions that people come up with. All right, we'll get to rock layers eventually, and fossils more specifically in just in a few weeks. What we want to talk about next is the issue of the type of animals you would have had come on the boat. So go to Genesis 6, 17 through 22. I need someone who will read that portion. Genesis 6, 17 through 22. Again, let me just get an adult to do it for us this morning. Okay, Sherry.
And behold, even I do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee will I establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons, and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee. And of every living thing of all flesh, two of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female. How far?
All the way down to the end of the chapter.
Of fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind. Two of every sort shall come unto thee to keep them alive. And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. Thus did Noah, according to all that God commanded him, so did he.
Okay, so let's get down here. What was destroyed according to verse 17? Everything that lived on the dry land, everything that lived on the earth, right, is going to die, wherein is the breath of life. What was the purpose of bringing the animals on the ark according to verses 19 and 20? To save them, yeah, to keep them alive. And he repeats it again in chapter 7, verses 2 and 3. What three groups of animals are mentioned in verse 20? Three groups. Fowl first. Yeah, then cattle and creeping thing. Did it say whales? Did it say fish? He's not flopping fish up on the boat, right? He didn't build aquariums. Why does he not need to build aquariums? Because there's a big one on the outside. Right? He doesn't need one. Okay? Let's talk about what these are. There's a phrase, hold on for a second. There's a phrase in verse 20 that he repeats quite often that you'll see. What is the phrase? After his kind, after their kind, after his kind. Two of every sort shall come unto thee to keep them alive. This word kind is important that we want to talk about. How many of each kind are to come into the ark? Two, the male and his female. And then he mentions that there's a bit more that are brought on of the clean animals. Now, what are clean as opposed to unclean? Anybody know? There's nothing written in the Scripture at this point that tells us what they classified as clean and unclean. Now we can go into about 1,500 years later and look at Moses' time and see what the Jews classified clean and unclean, but this is way before that. We don't know. But we're talking about animals that would be ceremonially clean or unclean type of cleanness, okay? But the clean animals, what is he supposed to bring? 7. Now people have said, is it the number 7 or is it sevens in the sense that they're pairs of 7? Don't know. Can't tell you. There are people that have argued both sides. They've actually gone into the Hebrew and tried to argue from both sides, and I don't know. So I'll just leave it at, if it is possible, you have an extra 14 at the most or an extra 7, okay, that are going on the boat. He mentions 3 kinds of animals. We talked about them. They are fowl, cattle, creeping thing. What is the fowl? Birds. Is that the only kind of thing that would be considered foul? That would be a bird. Look at Leviticus 11:13. Jump over to Leviticus 11, verse number 13. And he's describing the fowls. And listen what he puts in the group. Okay, I'm going to read it for you. If you got it. He says, and these are they which shall have, you shall have an abomination among the fowls. There he's describing the clean and unclean. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination. The eagle and the ossifrage and the osprey and the vulture and the kite after his kind. Now all those are birds so far. Every raven after his kind. And the owl and the nighthawk and the cuckoo and the hawk after his kind. And the little owl and the cormorant and the great owl and the swan and the pelican and the gyre eagle and the stork and the heron after her kind, and the lapwing, and listen to the next one. What's the next one? And the bat. Does that fit in the bird kind? It fits in the fowls, but it doesn't fit in the what we'd classify as a bird, right? So what would we say in the fowl group could be then? Anything that flies that would be not a bug, right? Okay, we're talking about animals that have the breath of life. That's the description of flying birds, flying bats. What other kinds of creatures fly that we don't commonly think would have been on Noah's Ark? No, that's a land animal. Okay, that would have been on there. There would have been some type of squirrel, but we're not talking about those types of things, okay? What other kind of normally flying creature would we normally, because we've let evolutionary teaching be in our minds for so long that we wouldn't normally consider to have come and landed on the boat? Some kind of a dinosaur type flying creature, right? The pterodactyls, okay? Some of those types of creatures obviously would have been on there as well. And if you ever get to go to the Ark Encounter and go inside, you'll see they actually got those creatures inside they put in there just to provoke a thought that this is what would be there. Why? Because they were all created with man. You know how far, if you go to the timeline, we're only looking at 1,656 years since creation. From the time Adam and Eve were made and all the stuff that was made, we're looking at 1,656 years. That's when the flood started. 1,656 years. There's nowhere you can fit millions and billions of years in there. We're talking about animals that obviously lived with them at that time. Okay? And we've talked about it in our dinosaur lesson. You've seen that the Scripture obviously seems to have some evidences for the fact that those creatures did exist. So that would have been one that would have been on there. Okay? What about when we talk about, someone might say something like this. It's impossible for Noah to have all the species of all animals on this boat. Even though it's a gigantic boat and can hold hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of railroad cars in its capacity, how in the world could you hold millions and millions and millions of species of animals on this boat? Anybody got an answer to that question? Oh, we got some smart Bible scholars in here.
Well, maybe he put two of each kind at that time, and through, I guess, the sin of the world, we had more that, bred into existence.
Okay, so let's think about it for a moment here. We know what's not on the boat. Nothing in the sea part, right? No fish. That takes up about 90% of species that scientists would say take up the whole animal kind. That's about 90% of them. The rest are animal kinds. Now we get into the animal different kinds. When we talk about a kind, anybody know the classification orders? Kingdom, phylum, order, family, genus, species. Okay? When we go through and we talk about species, we're talking about creatures that can no longer, they're so distinct they can't multiply with each other. Okay? That's when we talk about it, it's being speciated. It's pulled apart to the point that you can't cross them together. But when we talk about something being further up that could eventually cross, if we were to say, let's say one type of animal right now can't cross with this type of animal, but they can cross with this animal that can cross with that animal. Would they still be part of the same group? Yeah, they would be part of the same group, because if you remember back in Genesis 1, one of the ways in which he defined the kind is that they are able to bring forth after their own kind. They're able to reproduce within each other. That doesn't mean they won't ever reach a point where they can speciate to the point they've gotten so genetically brought down that they can't cross anymore. That does happen. And I'll give you an example here. The mule. What happens with the mule? Once he's born, he's over with, right? He can't reproduce. But is he part of another kind of animal? He comes out of the horse kind, doesn't he? It's called the equine kind. And you've got all sorts of animals that fit within that group. Let me give you some ideas. You got the big old Clydesdale horses. You got those Shetland ponies. You got miniature donkeys that's hanging out of his house. You got zebras. Okay? You've got all sorts of that fit within a horse kind. How many would have Noah needed to bring? All 2 of each of those varieties of the kind? No. 2 of the original kind, right? Which obviously implies that they would be able to move out over the earth and be able to have distinct looks whenever they got off the boat. Okay? What about, we talk about, you got a picture here of the cat kind, the felid kind. We talk about the cat kind. We can think about all sorts of different types of cats, can't we? All different looks. All different looks. And the ability, they've actually said that the reason why variety is more in certain types of animals as opposed to others is because of the amount of chromosomes they have that actually allows them to be able to make different looks and vary a lot more than normal. So like we think about the dog kind. How many types of just domestic type of dogs do we have? I don't even know. The ability, there's tons of them. And people are making up new ones all the time because they're crossing these others together. And somebody decides to say that's a pure breed, which really is a misnomer because it's not pure. It's far from pure. It doesn't come from the original. Most likely, the type of original dog was probably a wolf coyote type look that eventually, as it spread out, certain genes, certain things became more of a dominant trait in certain areas. You all have seen the Ken Ham video where he's talking about the variety of the dog kind when he said that, maybe some of you might remember, he said, let's say you got 2 animals, two dogs that come off the ark, and these 2 dogs that come off the ark, and they're both kind of medium-haired dogs. And they end up having the communication or the crossing of genes. They end up having a super long-haired dog. They get a medium-haired dog just like them, and then they get one that's got short hair. He said, let's say the short-haired dog decides to move to some place like Alaska. What's going to happen to that dog? It's not going to get longer hair. What's going to happen to it? It's going to die because it can't survive living in that kind of an environment. Let's say you have the long-haired dog and he wants to move down to the southern tip of, well, not the southern tip, let's say more in the middle of Africa. How's he going to do? He's not going to do well. Will he repopulate with his breed or with his ability? No, because those animals aren't even going to live long enough to be able to multiply. So it's depending on traits. This is what's called natural selection, and that's what people see. That's not just Darwin. That's something that's a natural part of life that God put in there. There's adaptation that God has put also within the kinds. But you see that ability happening where they're discovering about DNA today that DNA can actually reshape itself in order to accommodate itself to the stimuli that's going on the outside, so that when it reproduces, it produces something else that can handle what they're dealing with. They've actually studied that out. I've got a video if you want to see that. I'll show it to you if you're interested and want to see it. Is Genesis History is where that's actually found, where you got a guy who's talking about the ability of DNA to actually morph itself and change to deal with outside stimuli. It's possible. So when you're talking about all of these different animals, and you say, well, you couldn't have had it because you had to have all these species of animals. No, you just had to have 2 of the kind. You had to have 2 of the dog kind. You had to have 2 of the cat kind. You had to have 2 of the horse kind. You had to have 2 of the camel type kind. And whatever those are considered. You had to have 2 of all these different, of these kinds of lizard kinds. And do you get the point? You're not looking for millions and millions and millions and millions of animals. You're looking for just a few. Somebody estimated that the number they would have had on Noah's Ark alone, the number of animals, somewhere around 3,000 to possibly 20,000. Those are the number range Do you think that boat can handle that many? Yeah. It can handle that many. In fact, it's probably more a conservative number than it is a big plural number like 20,000, because of the fact that kinds are not so big as we think they are, or there's not so many kinds as we think there are. Okay? They've just varied over the years. Last thing, and then we're going to be done. We're not going to be able to get into questions. And I will show you this when we talk about kinds. Can you take one and pass it around here? This is, what about dinosaurs? We talked about maybe the flying creatures that got on. What do we talk about dinosaurs? Do you think they got on the boat?
Yeah, I heard he took 2 baby dinosaurs on.
He wouldn't have been putting the big old 40-foot tall dinosaurs, right? He'd be putting on little things. Every dinosaur has to start with an egg. How big is the biggest egg they've ever discovered for dinosaurs? About that size. You think you could fit an animal that's maybe a little bit bigger than that on the ark? Yeah, and they say that a good majority of the dinosaurs themselves were not big animals. You know, we just think about the big ones the most because they're the most significant and amazing. But then they say, but how in the world could he have all those kinds of dinosaurs on there? I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of different kinds of species of dinosaurs. The answer is still the same as when we talked about the dog kind. Did you see there? This is what's called the Ceratopsia or Topsia kind. Anybody know what a Triceratops is? You know, it's the one down here at the bottom. Look at these different kinds that fit within there, the different variety of animal that obviously probably was of the same kind. It just has different variety. Do you see the commonality in it?
All got the same mouth.
It got the same little beak mouth. They got that shield that goes on. The shields are bigger in some. Then some have more horns than others. Does that necessarily make them a different kind altogether just because they got more horns or less horns or bigger or lesser shield? No. And when they go into the Tyrannosaurus, you know, the big old meat-eating dinosaur. What about the Tyrannosaurus? Would they brought that thing on? Would they brought the big one on? No, they don't need the big one. They're going to get a little guy, a couple little guys on. And what are they eating, by the way? So it says they're going to be eating all the other animals. The Tyrannosaurus is going to eat all the animals that Noah brought on the boat. Well, first off, you get a baby, you could probably control it a little better. Second, even though there's evidence in the flood layers that the animals were eating other animals by that time, it's probably still possible they could eat vegetables because we're only 1,500 years, 1,600 years from creation. It's very possible that you could just feed them on fruits and vegetables and other kinds of things that they may have eaten still. Okay? Yes? Okay, yeah. T-Rex ate the unicorn. Okay. So, you understand that we can answer a lot of questions by just thinking through some of the stuff. There's a lot of things we haven't probably thought through. I know that when you get if you get a chance to go to the Ark Encounter when it opens back up, get a chance to go to the Ark Encounter, one of the things you're going to find, the discussion I thought was one of the most amazing discussions was, what do they do with how they dealt with waste? How would they have handled that? Or how would they have fed 8 people take care of all of these animals? And how did they have that? They had a process in how they did it. They said, we don't know that this is actually how they did it, but this is a way they could have. And they talked about how they would have had these feeding tubes that would have actually, just by weight, by gravity weight, when they ate, you know, we do it with dogs. We have those they eat a little bit and then more comes out, eat a little bit and more comes out. So they could have done something like that. Not a problem. And you don't necessarily have flat stuff. Flat stuff that they're sitting on. You could have had a graded place that they stayed in, and so when they had any waste, it would go right through and it would catch at the bottom in a place that they could cycle it out. So, I mean, there's all sorts of things we don't think about. What was Noah supposed to bring on the boat? This is the last one. There was one thing he was supposed to bring on the boat. Was he to bring the animals? Yes. He was to bring them up into the boat, but did he have to go find them? No, God brought them to him. What did Noah have to go find and bring into the boat? There's one thing. Food. He had to get the food to provide for that whole ship. So he had to make sure that food would be provided for his family, and I'm not sure how much time, if he knew how much time he had, I'm sure God would have told him something if he needed to know that. That's just not recorded for us. He also needed to get food for the animals, so which meant he probably had to study the animals out. Do you think so? I mean, he probably had to know what kind of food does this animal eat, and have to go get enough to be able to take care of that animal. How did they, if you remember, one of the things that Noah did right after he got off the boat, he sacrifices some of the animals that are the clean animals, and then he plants something. Anybody remember what it said he did? He planted a vineyard. A vineyard, if you remember that. Where did he get the seeds for that? He had extras that he had left over. I'm sure that's what he did with all his stuff that was left over. A lot of it was grain. A lot of it was seed that he would have had that he could have replanted when he got off the boat. They talk about looking for Noah's Ark. Did they need to go find Noah's Ark? What do you think Noah would have done with all that timber? He probably would have pulled it apart, because you're not finding trees that have grown up 20, 30 feet tall that you can cut down and make a house with, right? So he probably pulled it apart. So are they going to find Noah's Ark? I doubt it. You know, they've been looking for it for hundreds of years, for thousands of years. They've been saying, and people keep saying we see it, but every time they send someone up to go find it, they can't find it. I think that's funny. And the place where they think they find, the place that they think that it's supposedly at is on a place where it's volcanic. You know what happens with volcanic stuff? If you got wood with volcanoes, what happens? If it happens to be on that place, it's been gone a long time ago. So I just think we need to not worry about whether we're going to find it or not find it. I think there's plenty of evidence outside of finding the boat that proves that the Noah's flood happened. So, what's that? It only lasts 1 year anyway. That's right. All right. Well, I hope that's been helpful for you. It's enjoyable studying this stuff, and I hope it's a help to you studying through that. Give you some more. Esther, close us out here if you can. Give you some more details of what we got going on today so you understand. First off, we just left the offering plate on